My name is Jerm. This is Germ Warfare, the battle of ideas. Okay, there we go. So just a quick update. So last week I spoke to you from here because there's construction happening in our street and a bulldozer broke the fiber line. They then fixed it. And yesterday, a bulldozer did exactly the same thing about 2 meters along the road, further along. They broke exactly the same cable in almost exactly the same place. Completely butchered it. So I've got to use the Wi-Fi at the local coffee shop.
Expecting sympathy or something, are you?
I just cannot get over how the same thing can happen twice in the space of a week.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. It does make me wonder whether, because I would say this is absolutely a feature of the sort of the way that modern infrastructure is handled. I mean, I don't know whether this has always been the case.
No, but hold on a second, Charles. Hold on. Let's just be accurate about this. The cable is buried 2 millimeters below the surface. I mean, that is the main problem. Yeah. I've seen the photographs. That is the main problem. Mm-hmm. It's also not in any kind of shielding or trunking. It's just there, just literally right under the surface. So, anybody that's doing any construction work is going to break that cable. So I'm going to say, fair enough. They got the warning the first time because they broke the cable. They shouldn't have done it the second time, but at the same time, the installers should have had it properly protected and at a depth that isn't going to, somebody isn't going to trip over it.
I think there are going to be a few debates now about the depth that it should be. They did go down fairly deep, but not deep enough, according to one of the builders, because the bulldozer just goes right down.
Yeah.
But in fairness, Jerm, that kind of thing happens in the centre of London as well, as I have personal experience of. So these things do happen.
They do.
Yeah, well,
since this is a banter session, I may as well get in an early anecdote with which to ridicule myself, because you have been subject to a misdemeanor by somebody that is doing work actually not even on your place, or something that's obviously nearby that affects you. Now, many years ago, when living in another quite remote part of the south of England, we were on the very, very end of a very long old BT telephone line that had into the it's British Telecom. According to their website, you could purchase broadband internet. Now, that was an outright lie, and there was no account taken of the fact that the telephone barely worked because we were so far from the exchange, let alone the internet. Anyway, spirited as I was and still am, I wrote to the chief executive of British Telecom saying this absolutely wasn't good enough and they need to come and do something about it. And so that you get the executive level complaints team come and deal with you, and it's all very friendly and this, that, and the other. And they say, well, it's fine. We can send somebody out to look at it and see if there's anything that can be done. But it will cost you 130 quid to have it inspected, even if they can't, in actual fact, improve the situation. And I was so frustrated. I just said, yes, okay, fine, let's do it. So this was, I think that conversation happened on the Friday, and the appointment was booked in for the Monday. And I think it was probably around this time of year. So the grass was beginning to grow. The sun was making its presence felt. So I was out gardening on Saturday and pruning back a creeper on the outside of the house, when lo and behold I cut the telephone line with the secateurs, because it was exactly the same colour as anyone who would be familiar with that brown telephone line. It's exactly the same colour as the sort of arms of this creeper, and it never dawned on me. I mean, I knew where the line came into the house. It never dawned on me that they would run it up the outside. Anyway, more fool me. Of course, I then had the problem of how to tell BT that the situation had changed, because I'd cut the telephone line and therefore couldn't call. And I was living in yet another area where my mobile telephone did not work. Reluctant to admit that I did have a mobile telephone. But anyway, I managed to get the word through, and I said, look, bit of a change. I've actually, I use passive language. There's been a gardening incident and the line is no longer intact. If you can just factor that into the deployment of your operative on Monday. Yeah, fine. Okay, thanks very much. We'll pass that on. Anyway, this extremely nice chap turned up on the Monday, and not wanting to incriminate myself on the one hand or make myself seem like an utter idiot on the other, I sort of danced around the subject when he arrived and said, look, yeah, bit of an issue that the line has been cut. Anyway, amazingly, this absolutely turned out in my favour, because not only did it give him, as far as his sort of ticket was concerned, carte blanche to carry out work that he would not otherwise have been able to do, it meant that it was classified as a repair and I didn't have to pay for any of it.
Oh.
So he fixed the line, he re-drilled all the relevant holes, put a new box on. I mean, okay, we were still miles from the exchange and the internet wasn't that much better, but it was at least better. I hadn't, despite my own total incompetence, in actual fact, had to pay for it. So sometimes clouds do have silver linings.
So the moral of the story is vandalism and sabotage works?
Well, I mean, doesn't it just? Look at Nord Stream. Yeah, I mean, perhaps that's where they got the idea. I don't know.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Just quickly, Charles, I don't know if it's happening on Mike's side, but your mic is clipping just a little bit still. If you could just drop your gain slightly.
Problem is, I think it's dropping my voice.
What does not cost £130, though, is the magazine. Let's talk about that. That's exciting.
It is very exciting, and we are delighted that it's finally passed the line and in production, because it's been quite a journey in the last year. I mean, we've been talking about doing it for quite some time. We started taking it seriously about 6 months ago, and we absolutely went about things in completely the wrong order. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We've sorted all that out. We have a production schedule that works now. We have the right people in the right place, so we're in production. So it's going to be a quarterly. It's going to be a pretty beefy. It is a pretty beefy product. I mean, it's 8 mil thick. It's going to be heavyweight in the hand.
130 pages or something.
Yes, and the content's going to be pretty heavyweight as well. So it is somewhat different to the print product we were producing before. But, our intention is not to tread on the toes of the light newspaper, which has built a very clear niche for itself and is doing very well. So we're not in the business of wanting to compete with that, but we do want to do something which competes with the censorship agenda, and this absolutely is going to help us do that.
So what can readers expect from the first edition?
I think a heck of a lot. And I think, to follow what Mike's just said, it has been a long time coming insofar as the planning and execution has been concerned. And also, from an editorial point of view, I'd say it is quite fantastic how, despite the fact some of the content was written a while ago, it is amazing how prescient it has turned out to be, because we saw when we were considering what theme to pick for the first quarterly issue, it seemed to us, and this was at the actually well before anything was written, but in the sort of earlier stages of 2025, war, the spectre of war, and specifically war with Iran, was the sort of anchor point, and that's what we concentrated on. And we've had to so people get a flavour of what's in it. I mean, you can go to the website, go to shop.ukcolumn.org, and you'll see the list of writers. But in particular, let's say Chris Coverdale, who of course has been campaigning on this, the very point of taxation funding illegal wars. Catherine Gunn, who blew the whistle when working at GCHQ in a situation that very closely parallels what's happening now. That is fantastic to have those two, but also Vanessa Beeley's take on how this has been built through the years. I mean, there's so much to it. I think it's fantastic. I also would like to say that this, for me, has been tremendously enjoyable, because I think what I've seen on, let's say, this side of the fence, as in a place where you are well outside of the mainstream, you are shunned, spurred, ignored, ridiculed, and all the rest of it, and censored. Basically, every single thing we do. And I know this might sound like hyperbole, but it really isn't. As an illustration, let me explain a brief anecdote. It was sort of last summer. I I caught the Ministry of Defence in a lie concerning censorship and conspiracy with Police Scotland, and I had this conversation with their communications directorate in a fairly candid telephone call, and it was an almighty coincidence that a Telegram account that I was in possession of and a Telegram channel that I ran disappeared 2 days later, I think it was, and I started a separate channel, and that went as well. So it seems impossible to ignore that kind of coincidence. So this is the reason for mentioning that is that honestly the efforts that we make both at the corporate and the individual level are absolutely seized upon, thwarted, subverted at every turn. And this, when I think back to the time, I can't remember exactly when it was, but when Mike said to me in a meeting, said, right, we're going back into print. We are going to produce a magazine. And it's fantastic. That was a declaration of intent. We hadn't, well, I mean, we perhaps talked obliquely about print before. We hadn't had a sort of a warm-up discussion. It was just, right, this is what we're going to do. And I thought it was a terrific idea. And we have just pushed on and done it. And I think that's what I love about it. And this is exactly the point, is that we are forced in a way to harness the communication streams that are there, which are largely online these days. And of course, they are the ones that can be tinkered with, meddled with, controlled, and all the rest of it. But the physical production of a print magazine is a totally different game. And this is really fascinating in terms of the way we view everything, human interaction. If we think back, as we so often do, to 2020, what was absolutely the first thing they tried to stop was people meeting up, people interacting. No reason to close this place rather than that place. But if you looked, it was all to do with where communications might be had in a way that they couldn't be censored. And so I think this is a really significant thing. And again, to make the point that you just have about The Light, which obviously is a fantastic publication and has done very well. What I would take from what they do is that it is also terrific, not that we're sort of aiming to replicate that at all, but it is seeing the way in which people who do distribute The Light have interactions with people. It's great. It absolutely brings something else. So yeah, I think it's really exciting, but I think absolute huge credit to Mike for having this vision and pushing it through. And I really do love that, because I see a lot of sort of declared intent around us that fizzles and nothing ever comes of it. And so I think the achievement should not be understated, or the level of it should really not be understated. It's been a big undertaking, and it's required a hell of a lot of professionalism. And I think that's where Tim Norman and Diane Rasmussen have to get their very due credit, because this is not just chucked together. This is absolutely a proper, really well swept up publication. And I feel a bit like a hanger on, but to be part of that is really exciting.
Well, I'm quite privileged to be part of it too, and I see that Patrick Henningsen and Piers Robertson get a nod also in the first edition.
Yes, and quite a number of others. You know, it is. I mean, I have to say, there are a number of columns which are relatively short reads. There are some in-depth articles, but there are a couple of absolute megas in there, which are, significant undertakings to take on just to read them. It's going to be, people are going to get massive enjoyment from it if they grab a copy. So I just urge everyone to do that.
Yeah, I really do, and I think also, we did talk about this, so apologies to anyone who's sort of feeling like they're being bashed over the head with the same thing more than once, but because we did talk about this a bit in News Extra on Wednesday of this week. But I think the point, because we ummed and ahed a bit as to whether to go monthly or quarterly, and I think quarterly has absolutely been the right thing, because these columns and articles, I think the longer form articles to a greater extent, will be absolutely as relevant in 5 years' time as they are today. And that's the other element to this, to build up, to start with issue 1, and you get your you keep your set of issues of the column, and that again, I think is terrific. They will be such useful references in years to come.
Well, I've been promoting it, and I've been receiving some questions. So let's just quickly deal with a couple of those things. Like, is it available yet? No, it's still
It is currently with the printer. We will have it on the 31st, whatever day that is, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, whatever that is, and then the order fulfillment company will get those out as quickly as possible. So within a couple of days of that, I would imagine most people will have them.
Okay, and worldwide.
Absolutely. Now, worldwide, yes. Now we have a slight problem in that I'm going to reverse this situation just as soon as we're finished recording this today, but we had to temporarily switch off postage to the United States because we had a number of people who made orders for T-shirts and hoodies and stuff like this, which were over the value of $100, and then they got stung for tariffs. And in fact, in a couple of cases, we ended up having stuff shipped back to us, and so we have had to bear the cost of the shipping in each direction. So we had temporarily stopped shipping to the United States while we talked to the order fulfillment company about how we deal with the potential for tariffs to be put on stuff. But actually, we'll switch that on again for the magazine, because obviously that is significantly lower value than that. And so hopefully nobody's going to be getting massive problems. But you know, it has to be said that Trump's tariff regime is pretty difficult to navigate at the moment. But to answer your question, other than that, yeah, it's absolutely worldwide.
And so when you do place an order, you'll have the option for selecting the country, and then you'll be given a rate. Or how does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's just exactly as any other product at the moment with the any other product in the shop. But the other thing to say on that is, because we have had questions about this, will we be offering a print subscription so that people don't have to order each issue as it comes out? And the answer to that is yes. Again, we're not entirely certain how we manage the delivery side of that, so that's going to take a week or two to get organized, but we will be doing that.
Okay, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just throwing the question out. Will there be a PDF cheaper version for those who don't want to? Okay, so there we go.
No, but what we are working with, we are aware of a couple of companies that will provide tablet apps. I mean, I don't think, to be honest, I don't think it will work too well on a mobile phone. I think that's going to be pretty tricky on a small screen that size to do. But certainly on a tablet it would work, and so an iPad or an Android, Samsung or whatever. So we intend to make it available that way. But PDFs, no, we're not going to be distributing PDFs.
And it's glossy and beautiful.
Actually, it's matte and beautiful. Yes,
I thought it was glossy.
silky feel. I mean, it's if anybody has seen the Your Life in Their Hands report, it'll be a similar paper stock to that. It's 130 gram. It's pretty heavy paper stock, but it's going to feel nice. Yeah,
so I mean, it feels like quality. It's not something you're just going to shove to the side.
Yes. No, it is.
And that price tag is not very high, actually.
It's competitive, I think, with other products and that we might want to at some point compete with.
The relativity of these sorts of things, price-wise, is just so. I think we are in very strange times on that. I was saying to Mike, I mean, I now regret it, but I decided I would drink a pint of Guinness on St. Patrick's Day. It seems like an absolutely terrific idea until I was asked for £7.20. So two of those constitutes the blood and sweat.
That's expensive.
It's gone. Yeah, expensive. It is absolutely outrageous. And this was not in Soho or wherever, whichever part of. I mean, this was in Plymouth. So
Wait.
It
How
is.
much
It
is a
is quite
pint?
amazing
How much is a
how.
pint?
Well, I was just going to say, Jerm, it is quite amazing how quickly the situation has changed, because I don't know when the BBC made the series of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but in the first episode of that, Arthur Dent and Ford Prefect go into the pub and they order 10 pints in total, and he hands over a fiver and says, and the barman says, he says, keep the change, and the barman says, what, from a fiver? And I'm thinking, bloody hell.
Yeah.
This is how far we've come in terms of inflation in 40 years, sort of thing. It's just incredible.
Just quickly, how much is a pint? Is it close to a litre?
568. This is I'm so glad you've asked this question, because for our transatlantic audience, a pint is not 16 ounces. A pint is 20 ounces. An imperial pint. There's
people get shortchanged.
Yeah, they do. So an imperial.
Let's use the metric
pint,
system, Charles. Let's use the metric system.
No, Jerm, we will not do that.
Oh.
An imperial pint.
As a former colony, it's a disgrace that you're even suggesting such a thing.
Yes, quite. An imperial pint is 20 ounces, and that's 500. That converts to 568 millilitres, and a US pint is 16 ounces, which is considerably less. I can't remember what that works out at in millilitres, but these things really do make a difference. And sometimes you will find particularly at festivals and whatnot in the UK, and I can see exactly why this happens. You do have to check the glass that or the plastic cup you're given, because cash and carries sell pint cups in the UK, but to a US measurement. How exactly that started, I have no idea, because obviously you can still get proper imperial pint ones, but you do have to check these things. But it becomes very confusing, because then it throws everything out. It means that that all the things that we talk about that we think of being as imperial measurements that the Americans use, so anything from a pint upwards, a gallon, a quart, whatever, they're all different. They're all wrong, I would say. So highly confusing.
When I spoke to you a couple of nights ago, Charles, I was having a beer. I think it was about half a litre. And let me just do the conversion. I think it was probably around just over £3, or somewhere between £3 and £4. Is that, I don't know if that's a good price or not.
Yeah, but again, it is ridiculous, because, and I'm sorry to be a bore about this, but the reason I know is because I set up and ran a brewery of my own. I mean, I know exactly what the input costs are, and I know exactly how you price beer, and this is precisely the same as what's happening at the petrol pumps now. This is opportunism. There has been no shock, and okay, I'm talking prior to the last few weeks, but there has not been a shock to the supply lines running into the brewing industry that merit the doubling, or in some cases trebling, of prices. This is absolutely opportunistic, and it's completely corrupt. And the way I did it was different, but then this is going back a little while, I was able to sell beer for £2.50 a pint and make a decent profit from it. Okay, that was in-house sales, but it was just painful. I mean, even back then, to go out and have to pay well over double that elsewhere, knowing that they're absolute snakes and there's no reason to do that. But I mean, just because you're paying that in a pub doesn't mean that the brewer is necessarily charging. In actual fact, most of the case, they're not. But this again actually is a big problem. The way that the industry has sort of tried to change itself, but hasn't really worked. But they're still trapped. And this is where the COVID experiment was such an interesting one, because a lot of places have trapped themselves in this cycle of having to endlessly staff premises, and therefore their overheads are enormous, but they're not getting the footfall, and they've put people off because they've hiked the prices, particularly of their drinks, up, and they're reliant upon people coming in to spend large amounts of money on food. But the problem with that, of course, they take up tables for long periods of time and all the rest of it. And so many of our economic mainstays have been really challenged by the changes in people's behaviour. And this really is, I would say, applied behavioural psychology at work. This is nudge. People have fundamentally altered the way in which they behave. And it's so obvious because when you do come to a sort of traditional ye olde watering hole where people go in to buy drinks, you will be able to keep the prices low because it works. You are quite literally turning over at an appropriate rate, and you don't need to charge a premium for it, and therefore you will attract more custom and all the rest of it. So it's just yet another instance where it's so regrettable that people have been susceptible to these changes in behaviour. I mean, like the sort of working from home or doing this from everything done at the home, going exactly back to what we were talking about in the magazine, which of course means that people have basically isolated. They're being governed by what they're receiving through their various media devices, rather than I'm not saying everyone needs to be down the pub every night. Doesn't matter where it is, but just interacting with people and being able to sort of benchmark your opinions and points of view. But of course, you don't get to do that if you're being sold the idea of you get a takeaway or you get this, that, and the other, and you're supporting a totally different type of economy. You're not providing jobs for a local market and whatnot. So I think there's we talk, I suppose, slightly glibly about, that's a bit of a rip-off, but I think there's a much more serious side to this, and it's absolutely related to all the other sorts of things that we commentate on.
There's a little afterthought at the bottom of the description of the magazine, and I picked up on that because I have a secret love for pop culture. I know it's not a popular thing to say in alternative spaces, but I see there that you've got book and music reviews. Now, Catherine Fitz does this also, and I think it's great, and I'm glad that you're including some of that.
So am I, and I think that I must say is a part of the magazine that I think we want to expand in the fullness of time. But I think it's essential. It is absolutely essential that we do that. And I was thinking before we started recording today, because a few weeks ago, with I think what did you entitle it? Finding Beauty and whatever it was. But anyway,
Living Authentically.
Living Authentically, that's right. And it was actually a very uplifting discussion to be part of, but it seemed to resonate very much with large swathes of the audience, and it has had a really good response. And I was just thinking today, what is it that we can really that we can enthuse about and we can be positive about? Obviously, the magazine is a absolutely classic example of that, because it does so many different things at the same time, both within the UK column sphere and without. So that's a terrific thing to be positive about. But just generally, what does one take enjoyment from? And okay, again, this is only going to perhaps appeal to certain people, but I agree with you. The popular culture thing, although perhaps we're talking about slightly different things, I'm talking about books that were written by a retired schoolmaster from the 1950s. And if anyone doesn't know about these, but does have children or indeed sort of younger people they can get these books to, they are absolutely priceless, very well known, written by Anthony Buckridge, and they're all called something Jennings. So they're based on this schoolboy called Jennings, who just gets in endless scrapes, always of his own making, but they are outrageously funny to people of all ages. And I must say, I remember them from childhood, but to read again, especially because of the sort of dated nature of everything that happens. It is absolutely all sort of right. We'll just be outdoors, whatever the weather, we're going to grab all the kit, go up there for a picnic, and then everything happens. I mean, the bit that I was reading yesterday was to do with a school picnic that ended with a camp stove catching fire and exploding. I mean, it's okay, it's silly, but it is so funny, and it's so charming. And I know, yes, of course, there was bad stuff going on in the world in the 90s, but I think just generally the intrusions into people's lives then, as reflected by the way in which the book is written, are just incomparable. It really was a different world. And I really do maintain the belief that that we are able to bring back all the good that we can sort of extract from anywhere else and re-inject it into our lives. Probably shouldn't say re-inject.
Yes, that's a dangerous...
Sorry, re-establish. Yeah.
One of the comments under our recent video is, Charles, you speak too much. Let's give Mike a go.
Oh, yeah, I saw that as well. So just a few words.
If I'd wanted to say something, I would have said something.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other days.
Yeah.
There are other days when the complaint is, would Mike shut up? So...
Yeah.
It all balances out in the end,
Goldilocks.
Well, let's talk about the music also. I mean, what do you cover there?
With what? With the music? For the magazine, you mean? That's a very good question. I know that Diane has provided a music review, and I am not sufficiently qualified to comment on exactly what it was she reviewed. In fact, I can't remember off the top of my head whether there was anything else. Mike, do you remember?
No, and no, I'm afraid I don't.
But I do, whatever it was, and my apologies to Diane, because I know she did speak very enthusiastically about it. I know that it's a fantastic review, and it is, well, not only is it worth reading, but the music that she reviews is absolutely worth getting into. But I'm afraid to say, because like you've said, this magazine is 128 pages long. I would be lying if I said I could remember absolutely everything that's gone into it. There is a heck of a lot, but yeah, the music is great. I mean, I think, you know, if we can continue that and get into drama and theatre and all sorts, art, because there is, like all forms of, I don't know, sort of human output, these things are, of course, they're susceptible to being corrupted. But look, you know, you're an artist, you produce cartoons, and we think they are absolutely bang on. Jake Fern.
And by the way, we should absolutely say a massive thank you to you for providing the front cover, because
we should.
Yeah, it came out great.
We are.
It looks a lot better. It looks a lot better than I imagined.
It looks terrific.
The reason why I brought up the music and the books thing is because entertainment has been part of the human experience forever. It goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks, theater, reading, performance, you know, and I mean, when you drive in your car,
it goes back a heck of a lot further than that.
Probably. And when you go somewhere in your car, you don't drive in silence. You're probably playing something through the speakers.
Well, Mike, you go. I'm now very conscious of
Well, I know that Charles is spending, when he's driving, spending most of his time listening to podcasts of all kinds. Sometimes UK call them, sometimes not. So,
but that's also good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is definitely an opportunity to listen to stuff that we just otherwise don't get the chance to listen to. I have to say, I'm listening to quite a bit less music now than I used to. I'm not sure why that is. Too busy doing other stuff, maybe. But you know, that I think it's something that we should all be finding time to make room for, because it definitely contributes to you know, a balanced outlook.
That's the point. That's exactly the point. So if I go driving and I find there's just so much information overload that, in a way, it's just a great escape, even if it's for 20 minutes. Just put on some music that doesn't have any kind of social commentary. You know, a country song that's about a guy losing his dog.
Yeah, okay. There's lots of music that does have social commentary, and it can catch you out sometimes. But yeah, absolutely, go for something that allows you to switch off.
Well, exactly. That's the point that I was making about entertainment. One of the discussions I had recently was somebody was saying that's all bread and circuses, but you do need to switch off, otherwise you're going to slit your wrists.
No, because you're not going to slit your wrists. No. I think we discussed this before. Being a contributor to the conversation also helps deal with what we're experiencing at the moment. So no, I don't think. I don't think there's any urge to slit wrists at this point.
No. What I mean is, if you think back now to the COVID era, which was very dark with all the lockdowns, and you weren't allowed to buy this, you weren't allowed to buy that, and I think a lot of people just didn't know what to do.
Even in that situation, Jerm, you know, just speaking purely personally, I actually got a lot out of lockdown, because first of all, I largely ignored it, which meant that I had the feeling that I was sticking it to the man, as it were. but as well as that, you know, because, you know, I became very much more active actually outside and whatnot, because that was also in a sense an act of resistance. And but that's the switching off part. I was probably, well, no, it was also, maybe up to a point, but no, it was actually an active decision to resist the determination by the state that we should not be going outside and seeing the countryside and all this kind of stuff. So you know, too much of a degree, I have allowed myself to be indoors again, and this bring back another lockdown, I say.
Steady. You absolutely know it's coming, and then it'll
It
be
definitely
blamed
is
on you.
coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, sorry, just to jump in on that one, because yes, I think, and we did talk a little bit about this before, but I think there are degrees. Bless you, whoever that was. But there are degrees of switching off, because actually, yeah, I do. When I drive, I do tend to listen to UK column content, but it's partly because most of the driving that I do is for long distances and not short ones. So it does present the opportunity to digest sort of long format content. It is also partly to do with the fact that my automobile does not have its own music producing equipment. So therefore, listening to music is actually not an option. But I do, in actual fact, I do spend quite long periods of time, even in the car, not listening to anything. That again is a deliberate. That I would say for me, that is what switching off is. I don't consider. And sorry, this is not to disagree with you or sort of try to make a counter point, as it were. But to me, being entertained, so going to the theatre or listening to music or whatever, is still being switched on, but you're just switching in a different direction. To me, switching off is in fact just being attuned to your surroundings. You could say that you are still switched on because you're switched on to that. I think what I go back to is some years ago, and actually only briefly, but I fell into the trap of wearing earphones when I was out running. I used to do a lot of long distance running, and previously having worked in organisations or had jobs where a lot of physical activity was conducted sort of with groups of other people, so therefore was always something going on. Then I found doing it on my own. It was with the advent of all the, like you could get little music devices, sort of MP3 players, I think they were, and so I would listen to music. But then, of course, I fairly shortly realised, well, why would you do that? I mean, okay, if you're in an urban area, you could sort of say, well, because you blotting out the noise of traffic or whatnot. But even that's interesting, and the chitter chatter and the different sounds as you go from place to place. So properly soaking up what your senses will allow you to, and certainly in the countryside, I think it's unforgivable to block out the sounds of wildlife and nature and everything else. So I think there absolutely are sort of different stations, and I, which is not to discredit the idea of listening to music or becoming immersed in something else. I think that is totally valid, but I do think there is also a case for actually switching everything off and just being with your own thoughts, because I totally take the point about putting on a song or whatever, and it just seems like a distraction. But actually, it's not, or rather, it is. I mean, that's it. It's a distraction. It does distract you away from something,
but that's the point.
It distracts you to something else. Yeah. But I think to have times where there are sort of either there's as little as possible governing your thoughts and then seeing what you come up with. Because again, going back to the running thing, it could be when you're out walking, it could be whatever you're doing. But over the years, I have come back from a walk or a run with so many very clear ideas of something that I need to do, that I'm going to do, or whatever. I mean, it's an amazing catalyst for that. And I do not believe that the same effect would be achieved were I listening to whatever music or even a podcast.
That's my argument, Charles. That's exactly what I've been saying. That's why we go to the bush. I find it very, very inspiring.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, completely and utterly.
I've been trying to find a segue, and I'm absolutely unable to do so. But I really want to. I really want to comment on my most recent episode about the chemtrail and the geoengineering psyop, because it has predictably resulted in a response that wasn't very difficult to predict. I mean, that is, now I'm a psyop, or now I'm a controlled opposition, and my guest is also controlled opposition. Blah 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 blah.
So just let me understand this. Your guest was James Roguski. That would be the James Roguski that all those people have probably been supporting for the last 5 or 6 years, right?
Yes.
That one, and that's been highlighting pandemic treaties and whatnot.
Yes.
But because he has a view that is different on this topic, then he becomes controlled opposition. Right.
Exactly right. This is the thing. There's an inability to see nuance.
Yeah, I've not listened to it yet, but I really look forward to it.
I'd strongly recommend everybody goes and listen to it. It is so sobering, because what he does actually is that I bring this up because when I joined UK Column, I remember you and me, Mike, we had a chat about this, and it's for me it's an incredibly annoying topic, because it's either they're trying to kill us when they look up in the sky, which is it's a very strange thing, because that affects everybody, including them, because you can't get away from stuff that's in the sky. Or it's the government narrative, which is it's just water vapor, there's no harm. Of course, it's pollution. Obviously, it's pollution. If you turn your car on and you leave your garage door closed and you just let it run, you're going to start feeling a bit ill at some point because of what's coming out of the exhaust.
Look, my view, because I'm also controlled opposition because of my view on this, because my view for a very long time now has been that the chemtrails narrative, that every trail we see in the sky is the evidence of spraying something, the intentional, deliberate spraying something in the sky. That narrative is the best gift that the airline industry could possibly have.
Yes,
because
it's a deflection.
What that does is completely discredit any criticism of what is being pumped out the back of jet aircraft. Now, Charles's point, which is absolutely valid, is the aircraft that are flying on days when the weather conditions don't support the production of persistent contrails are still pumping out the same stuff. And the question is, what is happening to that stuff? Well, clearly, it doesn't stay up there forever. At some point, it absolutely falls out of the sky and falls onto the ground. And has anybody done any particular research into the implications of that? Well, I'm not aware of any. There may be some in some scientific papers somewhere, but it's certainly not something which is part of the public discussion. And part of the problem here, of course, is that we all want to go on our foreign holidays, so we don't want to criticize the airline industry too much. But the other aspect of this is the question of what is our attitude to the truth? Because if we are simply saying, well, they are spraying us, look up, with zero evidence whatsoever for the, where are the tankers that are pumping out this stuff on a daily basis? Where are the contracts for the spraying? Where's the evidence actually for it? There's plenty of evidence for pollution and for the effects of pollution on the ground. I'm not disputing any of that, and I'm not disputing the impact of the contrails, and particularly when they persist and they spread out over this and they effectively block the sun. And I'm not suggesting that there is no such thing as geoengineering experimentation. I absolutely understand that is going on. The issue here is the scale of it. And if we are saying that every single trail that is laid in the sky is the result of a geoengineering experiment, or the result of an effort by someone, the man, to poison us all, you need to show me the evidence for that, because otherwise it doesn't exist. And nobody has done that. So in the meantime, airlines are polluting the atmosphere.
So you're going to get pushback, because someone will say yes. People like Dane Wigington.
I've had pushback for years on this. Yes, of course. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And they have their view, and they are presenting what they consider to be the evidence. But I have not yet been convinced by that evidence to suggest to the degree that I could stand by a claim that this is the result, that what we see is the result of spraying. That doesn't mean that spraying doesn't happen. Again, I'm going to say it again, and I realize that reiterating this isn't going to make any difference to somebody that is totally bought into this narrative. I say it again, I'm not denying that geoengineering experimentation is happening. I'm not denying that spraying is happening, that cloud seeding is happening. These things are all happening. It's the question of what is the scale of it. And if we're talking about huge areas of this planet being covered in being sprayed, then I need to see the contracts for that, because otherwise I don't believe it. So, yeah.
Argument that James makes, which I think is very, very good, is that, like you, he says, look, these things do exist and they're probably part of military operations. And we do know that they have existed and there are patents and there are real examples of these things. But what you're seeing in the sky, like an Emirates flight or a British Airways flight, those airplanes are not equipped. What you're seeing is a misunderstanding of how the atmosphere works. That's the one argument. And the second argument that he makes is what's coming out of those airplanes absolutely is toxic. It is all kinds of pollution, which is a byproduct of the aviation and rocketry industry. Every time Elon Musk sends up a rocket, there's a lot of stuff going into the air. And he says, what happens here is that when you keep focusing on those trails in the sky, you're letting Elon off the hook, and you're letting all the airlines off the hook because you're not actually looking at the pollutants that they are producing as a byproduct.
That's absolutely right. But look, let me just deal with the patent issue for a moment, because patents are not reliable indicators of what exists. This is not the way the patent system works. There's so much, but there's so much speculative patent filings, so many speculative patent filings. So somebody comes up with an idea that may be possible at some point in the future, and they will patent that idea. It doesn't matter whether it's actually a real thing today or not. They'll patent it today because in 20 years or 40 years, somebody's going to want to do the same thing, and they're going to have to pay you a license fee for the right to do that. They may have solved the problem by then. So there are lots of things that are filed as patents which do not exist, have never existed, and never will exist. And of course, there is an entire industry of lawyers there just to bring cases around some of these speculative patents. So you got to be very careful about patents. The contracts, on the other hand, are much more convincing evidence, I would say. And but on the general point, it's not just Elon Musk that's getting let off the hook. It's every single airline. It's Boeing. Well,
that's the point.
Airbus.
Exactly.
It's the lot. You could say that setting the pollution issue in and of itself aside, which we shouldn't be, it's actually not that hard for airlines to fly at flight levels that don't produce persistent contrails. They could organize themselves to do this, but they don't, because obviously there's a cost implication in that. And so we at the meantime, we're dealing with the blocking out of the sun, and that would be issue number one for me. And issue number two, a close issue number two, would be the pollution. You just look at Flight Radar 24 and see the number of aircraft that are in the sky at any moment in time. Are we really saying that every one of those aircraft is part of an organized spraying regime? It's just incredible.
It's absurd. And when you go on a flight, let's say you're at Dubai and you have to climb into the bus that takes you to the airplane. Just have a look at the airplanes that you're going past. Do any of those planes look like they've been equipped with devices for spraying? I've looked.
Well,
and
where are they storing? Where are they storing all this liquid that they're going to spray anyway? By the time the people are on the plane and the bags and whatnot are on the plane. Most importantly, the fuel, hundreds of tons of fuel that are on the plane to fly across the Atlantic or to fly to China or whatever. Where is this material that's going to be sprayed into the skies?
And the pilots would have to activate some switch or something. The whole thing becomes very Hollywood-esque.
Well, no, that bit is easy to deal with, and that could be an automated system, but that's neither here nor there. Where is the product that you're actually spraying? It's not on an airliner.
And another thing is airplanes fly above us. You can look through binoculars or a telescope, and you can zoom in and have a look at the airplane, and you can see. People can supposedly zoom into the moon, right? So you can, of course, zoom into an airplane to some degree, and you can have a look and see where that trail is coming from. You could also follow, if you really wanted to, you could follow that airplane or find out where it's landing and actually go and see the airplane yourself at the airport. But nobody does that. They just take photographs with their cell phones and then moan on social media.
Yeah, and they should be moaning on social media, but not about that. They should be moaning about the pollution. Yeah, and the other thing about this, is if you want to deal with the problem, you got to think strategically about how you're going to run a campaign. And part of that, of course, is engagement with people. Yeah. And so the story that you tell around it you don't have to be telling lies, because the fact of the matter is that whether it is intentional spraying or not, it's still pollution. But pollution is something that the majority of people can get on board with, dealing with pollution. And a campaign built around that idea is going to gain much more traction than somebody going full hog, suggesting that they are out to kill us all in our beds. You know, and if you're actually wanting to get it stopped, you got to learn a bit about marketing and how you engage with people, because the whole chemtrail narrative is a fail on that score.
What he does is he looks at the nuance. He looks at the government official narrative, which is that it's just water vapor, which is false. And he looks at the chemtrail narrative, and he says that, and this is also a very, very good point that he brings up. He says the language, it stops people from going beyond a certain point. It blocks discussion. So you say chemtrail or you say geoengineering, and that's it. It's like saying flat earth or virus. Yeah. And then it's like a trigger word.
Yes. Well, I think that's the bit that I would like to deal with, I suppose. Although I would just make one point on I mean, exactly like you say, the scale. I mean, anyone, and Jerm, you will be well qualified to talk about this bit, but really, I think part of the reason this has become such a prevalent concern for a group of people in the United Kingdom is that there are so many airports in quite a small landmass, and therefore there are flights covering a large part of the airspace that people have visibility of. If you go anywhere that is not the case, there is no visible evidence at all that this is an issue. I mean, the periods of time...
in South Africa.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, East Africa is a place I travel to fairly regularly. There is nothing. You don't see anything. So this idea that it is some...
but it's just not spraying those people, Charles.
Well, no, but this is it. Yeah. So I don't, but I don't want to be facetious about it. But honestly, just run the logic through. If this really is a plan to destroy us all, to stop crops from growing or whatever, if that really is your belief, then the plan is a total failure, because there are vast majority of the world's food producing areas are absolutely not having the sun blocked out. Small parts of busy Western Europe are, but are they really the sort of powerhouses of agricultural production? Well, not really anymore. That's part of it. The other part, I would say, and I think we shouldn't ignore this, is that I absolutely do believe that conspiracy either does or has the potential to exist. And I think this has been, I'm dare say other people have been onto it, but I think this has been very well articulated by a chap called Jim Lee. I don't know if James Roguski referred to him, but Jim Lee the only interview I've seen him do was with Adele Bigtree. And what he talks about is exactly like Mike is saying, is the deliberate, or rather, sorry, the other side of what you're saying, which is basically manipulating flight paths and altitude in order that when the atmospheric conditions are right, that contrails are formed, because there is this belief that that they basically do affect weather or meteorological or climate conditions. Now that is significant, but that again is absolutely not evidence of spraying. That is a different thing, but that does shine a light on aviation authorities. I have specifically asked the United Kingdom Civil Aviation Authority about this, and I have had that denial that they are in any way able to control the altitude that flights operate at with regard to atmospheric conditions. Now,
so just to make sure we're clear about this, the CAA would be absolutely right to say that, Charles, because international air traffic control is at a different level. If you want to ask the right person, then we can identify the right person for that. But the CAA is probably not the right body to ask that question.
Yeah, well, actually, funnily enough, specifically my inquiry was to do with releasing balloons of sulfur dioxide, and the conversation then drifted towards the idea of aircraft. But yeah, as you say, that would be worth following through. And then I think the other point, because the title of your interview with James Roguski was concerning whether or not it was a psyop. And I think it is very important to decide how to define what a psyop actually is. And exactly like the way in which the COVID project unfolded, my view is that there was very little central control of the practical delivery of that plan. My view is that the COVID operation worked simply based on the media campaign, and that you sow the seed of doubt and you let everybody else do the work. And I can absolutely substantiate that by talking about all the responses of all the various organisations that I was involved with at that time when the sort of start button was pressed, whether it be the church or a charity or businesses or whatever. That was all conducted by the people who were running those organisations, who had clearly been primed for it by years of, oh, well, we've got to do this because we're caring and health and safety and everything else. And that was what triggered people to say, yes, okay, well, we must be responsible. We're all in it together. And that's why they all fell for it. So that's my view. And the reason I mention that is the way that I view the PSYOP is that to be designated as a PSYOP, as a psychological operation, it doesn't actually require the input from a three-letter agency, a sort of a shady outfit.
Yeah, exactly.
Beyond the fact that it's not being dispelled, dismissed, or suppressed, because it effectively generates a momentum of its own. So,
but that's what Matthias Desmet spoke about back in the day.
Okay, well, there we go, and this is totally observable. I mean, if you're a member of UK Column, you look at the forum threads. Well, actually, because James's one's only been on a very short space of time, there's not been much response to it yet. Although, actually, funnily enough, I did just look at the comments, and the first two comments on that thread are very positive about his take on the thing. So that again is interesting. But the amount of energy and attention that these conversations draw is absolutely extraordinary compared with anything else. And the point of that is that in my book, that constitutes a psychological operation, because it totally distracts people from being able to think rationally about other things and to do anything, because this assumes control of the mind, and it is therefore a de facto psychological operation. And it doesn't actually matter if you want to sort of trace it back, well, sort of where did it start. I don't see that is relevant.
This is such an important point, and the question is, the question of where people should be putting, if we've got limited time for campaigning or for whatever it is, where should we be putting our efforts? And let's just suspend our disbelief for a second and say that this is a massive spraying operation that's going on. Is that killing us in the next 6 months? Is it killing us in the next year? Is it killing us in the next 10 years? Or is it killing us in the next 50 years? Let's say it's a longer term operation. What's happening to us in the meantime? In the meantime, we are literally facing economic disaster as a result of a war agenda, because not only in the UK are we pumping tens of billions of pounds into Ukraine, we're pumping tens of billions of pounds into the efforts over Iran. This is money that's all being stolen out of our pockets through the taxman. It's also being stolen out of our pockets at the petrol pumps, and it's soon going to be stolen out of our pockets from the energy companies and from the supermarkets. This is stuff which is much more likely to kill us within the next 6 months rather than the next 60 years. So where should we be putting our effort? And should we actually be considering chemtrails as being, even if we believe that particular story, should that be our top priority? Or should we be actually getting involved in something which is significantly more immediate? And I think that's something that people have got to consider as well.
Okay, well, we have today chatted about controlled opposition topics, and so I would encourage others to join us in our controlled opposition by buying the UK column, first edition.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, I really hope it does well. I think it's a great idea. And I'm very, very honored to be part of it.
And we're glad to have you, Jerm.
Yeah,
so there we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope I'll have fiber next week. But until then, gents, I'll catch up with you.